Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here again on the former grade of the Canadian Northern Railway and later Canadian National Railway's Dorion and then subsequently Kinghorn Subdivision. We're here just south of the community of Dorion in the township of Dorion, and we're going to be working our way south from here, kind of south and then west towards Ancliff Station. This is right where we left off on our previous hike, right at this creek here. And so our journey again is going to be taking us a little bit south, a little bit west, kind of curvy section of grade, and then some really straight sections of grade. So you can see the section in front of us here is particularly straight, and then it starts to curve. So while we get going here, we're up on the top of this embankment. It's a beautiful May day. It's the 1st of May. I've actually been through this section before. So the section that we just did was my last hike of 2020. So that was done in November of 2020. And then I came through here just up to the rock cut that we're going to get through very shortly in December of 2020. And so I am a bit familiar with that. Hopefully the weather cooperates. It's kind of spitting a little bit this morning. Caught a little drizzle here and there. More concerned about the sun, because we are going to be kind of heading south at times, and I'm kind of worried about the sun going right into the camera. You can see it's trying to poke out here. Eventually it's going to clear. Okay, so while I have a minute, let's do our usual history lesson. So this line, again, was built by Canadian Northern Railway. Construction started in 1911 and was completed in 1914. The line opened for traffic in 1915. This is one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern Railway's transcontinental line. Just going to stop here for a second. One of the things we're going to see a lot of on this area is we're going to see telegraph poles. I don't know if that's two separate poles there. It looks like it. There's one there and there's one there. I can see one Dominion 42 on there. So we're going to stop and take a look at there's a bunch of other ones on here. So we're going to stop and take a look at those as opposed to the two that we just saw. So as I was saying, this was going to be one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental line. So between 1899 and 1902, Canadian Northern had built a line west from the then city of Port Arthur, which is now the city of Thunder Bay. As we pass through this little rock cut here, you can see there's a piece of fish plate, rail connector right there, and there's a spike. I guess somebody threw them up there. I wouldn't imagine they got up there on their own. So the first piece of line that Canadian Northern built was between the city of Port Arthur and Winnipeg. And then eventually they started building lines throughout the prairies. And then several years later, they started building north from Toronto into the Sudbury area. There's a culvert here, but there's no marker. I don't know the mileage. So they built it to the Sudbury area, and so this was going to be a link. This line was going to be a link between that line in the Sudbury area and the one here in the one in Port Arthur, as we come up to probably the biggest rock cut in this area. There's not really any rock work. You can see it is a fairly substantial cut. So as we walk through here, and I pan around, finish my story here. And so Canadian Northern was very hesitant to build this section of line because it was going to be extremely expensive to build the 500 miles between Rouel and Port Arthur. But their hand was kind of forced, and they did build the line. Now, unfortunately, only a couple years after the transcontinental line was finished in 1915, Canadian Northern started having financial difficulties. I didn't notice this. Somebody stuck a whole bunch of spikes in the seam of the rock cut here. Started having financial difficulties, and by 1917 they were in serious financial trouble, and eventually they were taken over by the Canadian government. And by 1918, Canadian Northern was forced to merge with a number of other Canadian government-owned bankrupt railways known as Canadian Government Railways. And so together they formed Canadian National Railways. And Canadian National Railways, that process was completed 5 years later in 1923 when all of the Grand Trunk lines were brought into the fold. So this line, which was originally known as the Nipigon Subdivision of Canadian Northern, became the Dorion Subdivision of Canadian National Railways. And it stayed like that until 1960, when the Dorion Subdivision was merged with the more easterly Kinghorn Subdivision. And the whole line became the Kinghorn, and remained as such until 2005, when Canadian National decided to discontinue service on this line. And beginning in 2008, right in this area here, they began ripping up the rails, and that process was complete by 2010. Okay, so we're kind of on the cusp of yet another embankment here. This section you're going to see is basically this first little section here. We went through the rock cuts, is going to be embankment, cutting, embankment, cutting, embankment. There's a series of little creeks that pass under here, and they all kind of merge into one creek and then flow into Lake Superior, which is just to my left, just to our kind of east, I guess. There's no name to that creek. I wish there was so we can kind of identify it, but unfortunately there's not. So we're just going to jump on the bike and just continue kind of pushing our way to the south and west. So back up pedaling here, and I'm going to zip you ahead to our next kind of area of interest. We're up on top of this big embankment here, and so just kind of sit back and enjoy the scenery here as we fast forward. So here we're getting into that pattern here. So embankment, here's the cut, and again this is kind of the pattern for the next little bit here. There is a tiny little bit of rock work in this section here. One of the interesting things is you'll kind of notice the nature of the rock starts to change a little bit, and it's something we'll see on subsequent sections. We start getting into a little bit softer type of rock, very reddish tinge to it. You can kind of see it on these rocks here. And then somebody lost their shoes, and we'll see it better up ahead, like closer to Pass Lake. You'll really see that. Again, looks like some piles of telegraph poles here. Looks like some cross beams that are there. The first section here is lots of physical stuff, and then it kind of flattens out a bit. And then we start getting into lots of remnants as we get closer to Ancliff. Lots of little trails and such as well. So you can see a little one here crossing the grade. I don't know if these existed before the railway was discontinued or afterwards. I don't know. Some pieces of culvert here. It's interesting sometimes too, as I said, I was on this section in December. There was a little bit of snow on the ground, so I did miss a few things, but it's kind of neat how your perspective changes. Like I came kind of north first, as I always do, and then I do the bike and record on the way south. And it's kind of interesting, your perspective changes quite a bit. Yeah, it is really going to start to clear up here in a second, and hopefully that doesn't mess with the camera too much. It is just completely clear up there. Okay, so I'm going to zip you ahead to our next stop here. Okay, so we passed through Another cutting, and then now we have yet another culvert and another little embankment. You can see here, and we're going to see a few more examples of this, of some of the deterioration that's happening to the grade. And so you can see there's kind of two big sinkholes that have developed. I don't know if the culvert has kind of collapsed or as the water's kind of worked its way beside the culvert and kind of washed it out. But that's becoming more and more problematic. Now our kind of real point of interest is right here. And so right up on the side of this cut. So I'm going to stop here. And then you can, I don't know if you can make it out. Actually, there's the base of the telegraph pole right there. I couldn't see it. I usually stop and record these little segments on my way north. So there's the base of the telegraph pole, and you can see part of the pole up there, and you can actually see a couple insulators. So we're going to jump up there and take a look at that. Okay, so we scooted up here. I don't know, we're about 10 feet or so above the grade. And so kind of a neat another little discovery here. So we do have a piece of a telegraph pole. And you can actually see two pairs of insulators on here. So a couple Dominion 42s. I don't know what this one is, but this one's a Hemingway. You can see that one on there. I cannot flip this one here. This one's a Brookfield. So two of the kind of more rare green ones. As you can kind of see, there's another piece right up there, and it looks like it has a Dominion 42 on it. I can't see any other pieces. Looks like there's a piece down here as well. I don't know where the base of the pole is. I don't see it kind of around here. Anyway, so we're going to jump back down on the grade and just continue pushing south.